Okay, I think we are live now. So just a quick audio check. Sid, is my audio clear? And I hope my audio
Yes,
is
sounds good. Sounds good. No
awesome.
background
Awesome.
noise. Doing great.
Okay, so with this, let's start. So hello everyone, I'm Sunil Kumar Das, welcoming all to the show, the Sunil Show. On this podcast, we dive into exciting world of IT and project management, from discussing project management to product development, business analysis, and the latest trends. So we cover it all. Subscribe us on YouTube and join us on the Sunil Show for valuable knowledge and inspiration to propel your career forward. So today, I'm excited to welcome our guest, Said Buchnan, to the show. Said, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome. So, how have you been? How is your day so far? How you're doing?
Pretty good. Started early, getting the kids breakfast, and then up and going. I have a 3-year-old little girl and a 6-month-old boy, and it's everything we can handle. But it's good. Makes Saturdays fun, and yeah, it's been very good.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. So before we dive into our technical discussion, so could you please share something about yourself, your expertise, and bit about yourself, with our audience?
Yeah, of course. I had a little bit of a maybe non-conventional path into project management. So I came out of school in America in 2012, and the economy had crashed in 2008, and so the job market was tough. I had a degree in finance, and I was expecting to be an investment analyst of some kind. That was just kind of the career that was put in front of me during my degree work, but there was just nothing out there, particularly for entry level roles. And so several members of my family were in telecommunications. And so through some of those connections, there was a contract entry level role at a company called Crown Castle, which owns cell towers. And it wasn't financial analyst like I was looking for. The job title was project coordinator dash financial analysis. And
Mhm.
from a project management standpoint, you recognize the project coordinator title, but I didn't. I had no idea. And so, but that was the opportunity that was presented to me, and so I jumped on board. And that first role and several roles after, I ended up moving into finance, but it was all about supporting the financial and data analysis for project teams. And the project work in general was about around those cell towers. It was constructing, updating the equipment for AT&T and T and Verizon on those towers. And so I kind of built some level of expertise in the analysis of that work. But Crown was a somewhat small company at the time, and I didn't have a career path in finance. And so the next open role to me was a project manager role, and I just jumped in. And I've been hooked ever since. It's just been a blast. So that first project manager role was really focused on construction and pre-construction, I would say. It was supporting T-Mobile,
Mhm.
and it was really just about updating their technology to their 4G, the 4G spec, and there's hundreds of sites, right? And that's where I learned project management, and then in kind of a progressive track, managed larger and larger projects, began to manage teams, and it wasn't until I was there my whole career until October 2023, where a relocation just made it untenable for me to stay. I had the opportunity to move to Houston, but I just decided to leave and start my own firm, and it's been a great experience so far. So my firm's Connective Project Consultants, and now we really the best experiences that I had at Crown were around project planning uh, for large projects, national projects. And so my company focuses on, um, how do I usually say it? Recovery, project recovery. So if projects in the tubes, you need somebody to show up immediately, help, and then leave. Project recovery, and then planning of new projects. And that's been what I've cutting my teeth on so far, and it's been great. So, unconventional career track maybe, but I've fallen in love with project management, like so many of you in your audience, and yeah, I'm here to stay, I think.
Yeah. So that's a remarkable journey, You were looking for something and you ended up working on something, and eventually you are leading your own firm. That's a remarkable journey. Now, I would like to understand one point. When you were looking for career in the finance domain, and you ended up working as a project manager, and certainly I believe there was a sharp learning curve involved. You know, so how did you tackle that one? Because you were new into project management. You know, so how did you able to manage that learning curve and initial year or two?
The finance role that I was in was just integrally tied to the projects and their success. So it was a finance role. So I was first and foremost concerned with dollars in and dollars out. When we were going to recognize the revenue, when we were going to spend money, and what the service gross and net margin was going to be on all of our projects. So that was my first priority. But in order to truly understand and to be able to forecast and analyze the financials, it was just essential that I learned the business and how it worked. I had to learn, how long it takes to get a set of construction drawings, so that we could figure out when we were going to recognize the construction drawings revenue. I had to learn how to get better pricing from vendors and construction vendors and GCs, and how to work with them to make sure they're successful, so that I could understand how the financials were going to play out. And so it really ended up being a very natural progression to where, so into the data, so into the financials, the cycle times and everything, that by the time I was moving into a project manager role, really understood the business very well. At least, I felt like I
Right.
did. And so it was more natural than maybe some other, just by virtue of the company and what was needed from the finance team in that place. It was a more natural transition than maybe some other places might be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, understanding the finance from a project manager perspective, how difficult it is, because somebody from let's say a tech background, somebody has done BTech or MBA or MCA, but he or she has no experience into finance. Is it something quite easy to understand that particular domain, or what you suggest? How can somebody gain some knowledge, some entry level knowledge, so that he or she can understand the finance terminology, finance background, and etc. while dealing on a project?
That's a great question. Finance and just data in general, the data around the project,
Right.
to me was in so many ways I was unprepared, to like, I didn't know how to deal with a customer. There were a lot of things that when I moved into project management I needed to learn and learn quickly. But something that what helped me be successful when I had so many gaps to cover was the data and the finance, the understanding of the business. And whether it's telecom or any other industry, to me, whether you're planning a project, you're in the middle of execution, it's essential to know why the project is happening and what's motivating the company to move forward with whatever objectives it has. And that's almost always somehow related to the income statement, the balance sheet, the finance. And so
Mhm.
if you are, so number one, I absolutely recommend, no matter what kind of projects you are running, finding ways to learn and understand the profit and loss of whatever company you're in. Uh, from my experience, the best way to do that is finding a mentor in that space. You really, you can take courses and read books and do things like that, but until you're in the meetings, and understand the conversations, you're missing something, I think. So the mentors that helped me, they were far and away, more successful than I was at that point in my career. And I would have no business being in the meetings they were in, but I had a few skills that they needed that I was able to offer my support to. I was able to run a spreadsheet, get some, pretty clean data analysis out of our projects. And so When I provided that to those mentors, they in turn brought me into meetings I had no business being in and taught me all kinds of other things, right? So that's probably my best recommendation in terms of developing your skill set is one, finding that mentor, and two, using something that you have already in place to help them be successful. Because, the mentor mentee relationship that's so often talked about on LinkedIn, uh, some companies have that very like hard structure to those mentor mentee relationships, but in most cases it's informal, and the best way to find that is to help somebody be successful, and they will in turn support you in your development.
That's great. Even nowadays corporates offer this mentor and mentor kind of training program where people motivate each other, they learn from each other. That's how we build a collaborative environment. And people programs more often, the bigger organization, they take care of this one. So it's very true that we have to find a mentor and learn from him or her. That's great. Now, when we talk about today's our agenda is, we'll learn and everything from you is the project planning. you know so when we talk about project planning, it is one of the most essential steps in our project, right? And it involves a lot of techniques. I would say the brainstorming sessions, we need to deal with people, so it involves people, it involves techniques, involves tools. So to start with, what's your initial thoughts on project management in terms of project planning, and how important it is to learn the effective project planning?
Project planning to me is the best, cheapest way to increase your chances of success. And there's a lot of data that you can find around that. The Project Management Institute posts a lot of data and papers and things, and one in particular, particularly around construction projects,
Hmm.
illustrated. And I have a LinkedIn post about this somewhere. You're welcome to go find it if you're interested. One of the just statistics that stuck out with me the most is when they looked at the correlation between all of the different practices that you do as a project manager and its correlation to success. Planning and its completeness was the strongest correlation possible of all of the typical project management behaviors, which means and it was planning completeness. So the more often you complete planning, the higher chances of success your project has in meeting those objectives. I thought that phrasing and the way that that study came out was really interesting because I think most projects have some planning, but in my
Correct.
experience, most projects stop before they're done because the pressure to execute is so high. In a lot of cases, your customer or your sponsor, whoever it is, has already paid the money, and they're asking, when is that first milestone going to be ready? And so that pressure just mounts and mounts and mounts. And in so many cases that I've seen, planning starts out very hot and then falls off in favor of execution. And that is a lost opportunity, I think. So I'm a huge
Correct.
fan of.
No, that's very well said, because it's the correlation of your project planning and project success is, it's kind of directly proportional, right? The more you plan in a better way, the chances of getting succeed is more, right? So that's very
Yeah.
true. Now, when we talk about planning, let's say somebody is working in IT industry and they are following the waterfall or a traditional methodology, you know so we have lot of things to, it's a kind of overview, right? We have to break things down to make it simpler, or the manageable chunks, what we say.
Mm,
So it involves an agile as well as waterfall.
yeah.
Now, how do you suggest, what would be your approach breaking down the larger project into smaller chunks effectively, and which will be kind of easy to manage the milestone?
Yeah, it's essential. It's a great question. So you mentioned agile versus waterfall. It definitely. I'm always in the middle of those two things, right? And I think most project managers in practice, it's a blend of waterfall. The best practice is a waterfall and agile. And the slider is really
The
about like
hybrid model.
Yeah, and the slider, whether you're doing more agile or more waterfall, to me is heavily tied to how much you know about what's being asked and what's being delivered. You know, a lot of software projects, it's about progressive iteration, and you don't necessarily know what's going to break, what the customer is going to want, and new features. But if you're on let's take the IT side. So one project I'm working on now on the IT side is developing the network, the data center, the Azure stack for a metal manufacturing plant. And so that's very IT related, but it has hard and fast deadlines that you cannot miss. This network has to be up for me to turn on this huge piece of machinery. And so you got to
Yeah.
waterfall that, otherwise, if you just, do sprint after sprint after sprint and, keep iterating, you get to the end and you figure out, oh, we needed to be done by now. So, anyways, slider, waterfall versus agile is a lot about what you know about your deadlines and what's being asked. Now, to your question about how to break down your project, to me, PMBOK and the tools that they set up has very much informed how I have done that in the past and some of the successes I've had. So that's what I take from a lot. To me, it starts with a project charter, and the charter. And I will try not to go into too much detail here, but the charter really is defining the key objective and the constraints, so cost, time, and quality, and then what within that mass objective, what key milestones are you delivering? So, for instance, I'll take let's take a telecom example. So, I'm building a new tower. The tower is the objective of the project. The milestones, though, are broken down. You can break them down progressively. Really, with a tower build, there's two major milestones that I like to take. It's pre-construction and construction. So it's two milestones. So you got two. But within pre-construction, there's A&E, regulatory, rental agreements, zoning and permitting. There's probably maybe 5 or 6 major milestones within pre-construction, and within each one of those sub milestones, you have anywhere from 5 to 20 tasks. And so it's just an essential practice of planning to take the major objectives and to break it down into as small as necessary, bite-sized pieces of work, primarily because to me, there's two reasons for this breakdown being essential. One, you don't want to miss work and be surprised. If you misunderstand what's going to be required and you get surprised midstream, that is the death knell of any projects. You can surprises are the number one rule in project management that I've always been taught is no surprises. And breaking down
Correct.
you from a charter to a work breakdown structure is first about eliminating surprises, and two is about collecting stakeholder input. As the project leader, project leaders come in all kinds of flavors. Some are experts in their field, and that's why they're the leader of the project. Some are experts in project management and are leading the project kind of from those tools, but maybe don't really understand the details of the work. Either one, your stakeholders are the experts, and so the process of breaking down those milestones is really about getting their input on the table too. So very important.
Yeah, that's very important because always the project managers are not the SMEs, subject matter experts. They know how well they can manage the project without knowing the nitty gritty of each and every detail. They are not technically expert, probably in terms of the construction or marine or any domain that we consider. However, they know very well how to manage a project by considering stakeholders, by managing people, by managing the tool, using the tools. So it's very much essential for us to have prompt communication with the stakeholders and no surprises, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So people hate surprises. So we, as a project manager, we must take care of this particular attribute.
Yeah. I
That's
have
great.
a I have,
Mhm.
if you don't mind, I have a great example of a time where I really messed that up. So one of the largest kind of planning exercises I did at Crown was for Dish's 5G rollout. And I was the national project program manager for that. And and came up through the system. I knew the steps to get a permit out of each jurisdiction. But what I didn't know was the specific jurisdictional requirements for the 1,000 jurisdictions that we were going to have to go into over the course of 18 months. And there was one case in particular, one region that had, for the equipment, they're common in Louisiana, common to flood everywhere. And so your equipment has to be elevated. And I did not, because I did not get that detail out of the stakeholders in planning, we got surprised by that knowledge, or by that requirement rather, and it delayed us for a very long time. So, and again, the kind of learning lesson there is I knew the basics, right? And I knew in general the process, but when it came down to the specific local nuances, I was not the expert, and that was a miss of mine, and it cost us a lot of time. And so it's essential to get your stakeholders' input as you're breaking down your project.
That's kind of very unique situation as well. Now, one thing to understand, uh, there is a consequences for every mistake that we do, right? Now, how can we digest those? How can we capture and put that in our lessons learned? Because eventually, let's say in IT, something, what I feel is something can happen. Okay, we can take the consequences, okay, delay of time or something. But when you are in the field, when you are dealing with local, local people, so how did you do manage that one? How did you take the lessons learned, and what was the situation actually? What was, going through your mental situation, because there was a lot of things going on. So how did you able to manage that?
So yeah, two angles to that really. The first was when that surprise happened. And look, I've never been a part of a project that went 100% smoothly and was green the whole time. And so, how you react to surprises, to missed deadlines, it's going to change depending on the situation. But there's a couple, principles that are that I was taught that I think are really good to follow no matter what. One is the bad news doesn't age well. So as soon as something goes south, um, really sooner, hopefully, but as soon as something goes south, your communication has to go into overdrive. Communicating to stakeholders, customers, your sponsor, that some kind of risk has fired. Now, you try to eliminate surprises, right? And to do that, it's best to catalog risks. You start in planning, and you're really doing that during the whole project, and you talk about those risks ahead of time. So if we had known this was a raw surprise, so we didn't have this on like a risk register or anything, but there are other instances where we knew it was possible, let's say for a power company, to stop us from being able to complete some of these sites for various reasons. So we have that on a risk register, and we talk about it. We try to mitigate it. But when it happened, because it was on the risk register, the communication was what we worried about the whole time has happened. That is much more digestible, particularly if you've thought about mitigation strategies if it does happen ahead of time. That much more digestible than something you've never thought of, never documented, all of a sudden blows your project up. In that instance, hypercommunication is key. Recovery plan is key, right? So if you have your schedule and you went through planning as detailed as you should have, you have the you call it float, slack, whatever it is. You have the chances downstream to pull in your schedule already identified. So it's once a surprise fires like that meeting is important as well. Figure out your best strategy to recover as much time as you lost as possible. And then, like you mentioned, lessons learned. When the project's done, in this project management principles can be transformative to an organization in a lot of ways, and this is one of those ways. When the
Yeah.
project's done, you've got these lessons learned that you're logging throughout the project. A readout of those to your highest level sponsor, executive, stakeholder leaders can help can help transform the organization so that risks like that don't happen in the future. In this instance here, we need, in order to avoid that issue going forward in our organization, it was going to take a process change that an entire organization would have to buy into. And so the as a project leader, the program manager, the project directors, cataloging those things that went wrong and having a readout session that is collaborative, transformative, whatever you want to call it, it was essential to make sure that doesn't happen again.
That again, a lot of things we have to take care of afterwards, or once any surprises happen. So we have to deal with a lot of consequences again. So sometimes it is very good, because from there we can, and there will be possibilities or opportunities for us to enhance our process, right? And because of which, let's say the version one of process, because of which you missed the surprise, or you were not able to identify that, but once you work on that, you enhance that to become a version two of your process. Hopefully you will amend all those things in your new one, and the operation will run smoothly. That's a great one again. So here I would like to understand one thing. Now, when we every milestone, when we are chasing towards meeting one deadline or milestone, it has some objectives, right? Similarly, the whole picture has whole project has one the greater objectives. Now, when we are chasing towards milestones, how can we make sure we are meeting the milestones objective along with the project's objective? Because when we are dealing with milestone, probably there are a lot of changes. Customer or the stakeholders will pull into you some discussions where you discuss about some new changes that are going to happen. Meantime, that change is contracting the overall project objective. So you being a project manager, you have to carefully plan this one, and you have to say yes or no to the stakeholders. So this situation, what would be your thought process? How do you deal with this kind of situation, and what strategies you will apply?
So the situation that I'm hearing is that so you have a particular milestone within a larger project where a change happens in some way, and you have to figure out whether that change is acceptable given the larger picture
Project
of.
over, right?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the mistakes that I've certainly made and project managers can make is to make those decisions in a vacuum. uh, when a change is needed that impacts the rest of the project, you've got to have eyes from the other sides of the project on that change to help you make the approval or rejection decision. So let me think of an example. Oh, well, maybe we can take this floodplain example. So part of the solution to that floodplain issue was to engineer, fabricate a particular type of raised platform to get the equipment out of the water, right, out of the flood. What that was going to do, so that was going to have a cost impact to the bottom line on each site, and it was going to change what we were bringing to the jurisdictions to get a permit with. And so the approval or failure, or approval or disapproval of that direction needed input from, again, the local people who understood the local jurisdiction's, constraints, and the engineering group, and several other places as well. And so that, to me, again, changes can of all shapes and sizes happen throughout a project. The best way to deal with those is to tackle it as a team. You got to have as much input, as much expertise as possible. Trust them to get you the information you need. And then whether it's you or maybe there's a project sponsor that has the ultimate authority, hopefully that has been clearly laid out in planning. Who makes the final decision on project changes, and with all that information, the best information possible, that person, whether it's you or your sponsor, makes that change and communicates.
That's a great one. Yeah. So now, on the same note, what tools and techniques? that we have in place, or you find most helpful for visualizing and managing that milestone dependencies? you know
So
so can you list
techniques
out some techniques? Yeah.
techniques for managing milestone dependencies. Well, well, one of the things. So I have a project going on right now that is interesting. The so it's the development of a manufacturing plant, and we have so that project is thousands of tasks and over across years, very large, high, $30 million budget, very large project, and there's a lot of project leaders in the space supporting various aspects of this project. And one of the things that this firm has done is contracted a firm to help schedule. So they use Primavera. It's one of the large scheduling packages, and um, one of the challenges that that creates is they're not embedded in the project, and so what happens is as changes happen live during the week, they don't get put into the plan and adjusted in the schedule until this vendor is re-engaged to adjust the schedule. And there's reasons why they do it that way, and that may be best practice for some. What I found is your schedule, in order to be as agile as possible in the project, your schedule isn't really a something you do in planning and then you pin it on the wall and that's it. It's an evergreen document. If something goes, let's say, so like procurement or something puts a halt on cutting a purchase order to a key vendor, that delays us 3 weeks, rather than in some cases you may need 2 weeks to digest that into your schedule. I think that the live schedule and having a project leader there moving things around every day is the best way to make sure you're with agility adjusting to changes. Now the contrary to that, or maybe the contrarian point would be, well, then you can't hold people accountable to the original schedule. And that's where the use of baseline dates is incredibly important. In whether in Microsoft Project, Primavera, you set that initial baseline. That's your original schedule. Those are your milestone dates that are baked into the charter. But as you're running the project and as real conditions unfold, that schedule has to change and be evergreen, so everybody knows. All right, so I lost 2 weeks up here, so I've got to gain 2 weeks uh, downstream somehow.
Right. So on that note, again, what is the importance of adding some buffer time, or some buffer window for any milestone? Now, let's say something is going to happen within 6 months down the line, and you anticipate it may slip 1 day or 2 day or 3 days. So having that 5 to 10% of extra time, do you think it adds value, or it just waste of time? Or
That's tough. You get I would give a different answer, and depending on how things are going, at any given time, and I know a lot of others would give different answers too. There's certainly a risk management component to adding in some buffer time. I think that's a good practice in a lot of cases. But there's also been cases where my vendors will be doing that, and if I have a really tight timeline, that's just unacceptable, right? I can't have all of this fluff in the schedule and not have a real picture of what to expect. And so, for instance, if so part of the kind of telecom project builds is you go through the engineering, zoning, and permitting, and then somewhere in between those pre-construction steps, you're starting construction. You're ordering materials. You're developing the bill of materials. You're scheduling your GCs. And if I'm scheduling a GC based off of a permit, so you get the permit and the GC can go and do work. If I'm scheduling the GC on a fluffed up permit date, then all of a sudden when I get let's say I get the permit 2 weeks early because my vendor has been giving me risk adjusted dates, I can't pull in the GC because they've got their 2 weeks, that extra 2 weeks, they've got it scheduled for other stuff. And so that's a great kind of real example from the telecom world of where doing too much risk adjusting, and too much fluff and padding your dates can actually harm the project. And so the question then for those stakeholders is, how do I get as accurate as possible? And just know, let's say there is a risk of a 2 week delay, but I can't have that in my date because I can't schedule downstream. The way, my preferred method of that is to give the real date, but to say, here is a risk that could fire. They could request that we, hand walk this permit in rather than emailing it, for instance. If that happens, this is a 2 week delay. And then, if it does, at least it's not a surprise. So yeah,
That's
I'm sure you get a lot of different answers on that, I'm sure, and I may feel differently some other day, but it's
correct.
good.
There are a lot of different kind of projects, and it's not one size fits all. So probably for some kind of projects, adding some buffer time may add value.
Mhm.
However, for the projects like construction, or let's say somebody is working on the nuclear power plant, they are working on some billion-dollar project, and for them 2 weeks of delay costs a lot. So it's very true. Yeah.
Mm.
So now again, we are working with people starting from the day one of the project to the completion and the maintenance process also. However, you as a project manager, you have to ensure your people, your key members understand their roles and responsibilities better way. They understand the assigned task in a better way. They have the required skills, and they need to be empowered to ask questions.
Mm.
Lot of challenges here, and given different circumstances. So how would you ensure during this one that your team members understand their R&R, and they never hesitate to ask you questions? you know
Yeah, that's a key output of project planning. So we mentioned the charter earlier, and then that charter leading to a work breakdown structure that pieces out, decomposes all of those key milestones in the charter. Another document that's very important is the RACI, right? Responsible,
Correct.
accountable, consulted, informed. You're taking all of those tasks and you're documenting who's responsible to get it done and who's accountable to support it if if it's not getting done on time, on schedule, on budget, whatever it is. And so planning is essential. Get that documented. Making sure that the stakeholders have input during planning is, like you mentioned, a great place for questions, challenges to be brought out. And but ultimately, though, the accountability of those documents has to come from their leaders. And to me, an executive sign off session, I have some content on this on LinkedIn, just in my experience. If there's any phase in planning that is going to get kind of skipped over, it's that executive sign off, because no one wants to do it. I don't want to do it. You're right. Putting my name down next to expectations feels very accountable because it is, and it's difficult, but you have to get it done, and you have to set that expectation from the beginning. So what happens when at the very beginning of a project, at the very beginning of planning, when you tell everyone, we are going to, and even put it on the calendar, we are going to have this meeting. Every executive is going to be on this call, and you are going to, in writing after the call, I agree to, deliver my portion of the project plan. If you set that expectation up front, that really kicks into gear the executives, their directors, all of their leaders, in making sure that the best inputs possible are into that project plan. Right, because if they don't think that the accountability is going to be that cut and dry, they're not really incented to make sure the project plan makes sense. And so it's really in their best interest, as well as the project leader's best interest, to set that expectation from the beginning, to go through detailed project planning and make sure everything is documented in writing in terms of who does what task and under what constraints, and then getting to that sign off, and everybody reply all, whatever it is, to an email. I agree to deliver my portion of the project plan. And then the project leader puts that in a public drive. And that's your monument, right? That's up there. And so anytime a project, has some sort of personal squabble or whatever, that's your foundation for resolving those issues.
That's spot on. That's very true. So the way one important thing is setting the expectation, be transparent, and effectively communicate what people needs to do, and I would say their portion of job it should be clear to them. Second important thing is during this journey you have to shift your gears, like the way we do. So it's always important to mold your communication, mold our leadership style in order to touch base with each and everyone and ensure they're working on their portion of job. And in case they have any impediments, you as a project manager you need to facilitate different meetings, the mentoring programs, and required knowledge resources. That's true. So whenever we're working on a project, it's very true that we will have resource constraints, and
Mm.
other thing, the conflicts. So, you as a project manager, what would be your thought process or some strategies to deal with first resource constraints, second the conflicts?
Yeah, that's another key output of planning. I think it's not just so a lot of times when we think of planning and resource planning, it's who's going to get it done. But
Right.
sometimes organizations will fall short because in planning, there's an opportunity to not only dictate who's going to get a certain task done, but what happens if this person needs more support. I'll give you for instance. So in telecom, we're managing hundreds, thousands of projects at once. And so the a key kind of variable of that is for, let's say, task 100, how many the task, let's say task 100 is assigned to an associate project manager. How many of those tasks can this person get done in a week, in a day? And you imagine doing that for 150 tasks. Uh, so you have that number, but what we are often falling short of is what happens if I have more volume than anticipated. What happens if I have less volume than anticipated? That person's not going to have enough work to do. What happens if this person gets reassigned and has another task in their name? All of a sudden, their bandwidth's cut in half. So developing so the assigning of the original owner and owners is often done, but developing the contingency strategies and what I use the term a lot, I don't know if it's the right term, pre-litigating what's going to happen if resource risks fire is a really important aspect of planning. Think about all right, so I have, let's say, a team of 10 and they're managing a certain task, and I have all of a sudden a 50% volume increase. If I don't pre-litigate ahead of time what I'm going to do to get more resources, I'm going to be in capital committees and approval and wrestling with my peers to try and get resources. Whereas I could have decided ahead of time that I have approval to hire two, or let's say five contingent temp workers to support this task for 6 months. You can pre-approve that stuff. Make sure it's baked into either the budget or the budget contingencies, so that when that risk fires, all I got to do is post the role. I don't have to go to my VP. I don't have to talk to procurement. I don't have to, try to find resources elsewhere because someone always wants to know, like, well, are there other ways we can do this? All of that's got to be pre-litigated in planning. And that's your resource strategy. Resource strategy layer one: what do I need to accomplish the project with the given constraints we know right now? Number two is, what do I do to scale up and what do I do to scale down, right? Let's say I have 50% of the volume that I expected. Um, do I have to lay people off? Can I reassign them to other tasks? That's, again, I'll say this, I'm a broken record, but a lot of this is only halfway done in most planning sessions. But it ends up being the things that delay you the most when you get into the unknown of project execution. So it's very, very, very important.
That's true. Yeah. So again, in project plan, just thinking ahead one step, it will definitely help you. And you always need to think from different perspectives altogether. So that's a valid one. Now, it's all about schedule, right? So when you create a project plan, it's very much important for us to maintain the schedule. be with the schedule. So how do you create and maintain an effective project schedule given or regardless of your project approach, agile or waterfall or hybrid, or irrespective of domain?
Yeah, so developing a schedule is probably the most labor intensive spot in planning. I mean, you have your key milestones and the key project constraints, right? The charter should dictate all of those, right? When do I need to be complete? When do I need to have milestone, let's say pre-construction complete? When do I need to have system testing done and UAT testing start? All of that's documented and at a very high level at the beginning of planning. And building that schedule is fitting in, decomposing all that work into the tasks and then making sure that you have the buildup of those tasks that make up those milestone dates, all leading to an acceptable date at the end. So we have, so let's say in telecom, we'll have often a 30-day design phase of some kind where we're designing the engineering and the construction drawings around that. That's really 10 tasks, one milestone to 10 tasks. And so as we get into scheduling, you got to make sure that, if your vendor tells they've got a 28-day process to make a 38-day milestone, you've got 10 other tasks to fit in there. That just doesn't work. And so that conversation becomes, how do I take a 28-day task down to a 14-day task so that I can fit in the approvals, the handoffs, the POs, all of that. And so, that's probably an hour-long conversation to just talk about how to build schedules. But starting from making sure you're starting from the top down. I think people do build schedules from the bottom up too, but I always starting from the top down, because those those constraints are so often ironclad. And if you're building a schedule from the bottom up without knowing that you actually got to finish at X date, then you're just going to end up with a schedule that doesn't get you where you need to go. So I don't. There's probably a lot more to say to that, but from my own experience, that's typically how it goes.
Understand? Yeah. Yeah. That's true. So again, to understand this is very true. People may follow different approaches according to the need or the uniqueness of the project. However, what techniques, no, general note, what techniques you would use to estimate task durations accurately? Because each task you need to find out the dependencies, the predecessors or the successors. However, what are the different techniques that you have, or your thought process on this one?
Estimate task durations. So from a construction telecom standpoint, a lot of that just comes from past experience. So there's a couple inputs into task durations. One is what the vendor wants or what your stakeholder wants. Yeah, I can get this done in 2 weeks. That's not, sometimes that's a slam dunk, but sometimes that's not always the best thing to put into your schedule. For instance, I had this is maybe from a personal example. So I'm renovating my basement, and one of the things I'm asking of the contractor is to at least give me just a general schedule for how this renovation is going to go. And there are certain so there's mechanical engineering, there's the framing, there's the HVAC, there's the finishing, the paint, everything like that. And one of the things that came back in an early schedule that during the bid process, painting was like $6,000, which is a lot, right, for this space. And I asked him, how long and how many people are you paying on this to get this done? And he said he wanted to get it done in 2 weeks. Well, no wonder you're charging me $6,000, because you're trying to pay two people to be on site to do a site for 2 weeks that could be done in 48 hours. So anyways, so there's but vendor input it does help, right? It's your first baseline. But then there is so your vendors give you input. There is also your historical data, right? So in a lot of cases, organizations are doing projects that they've done in some level in the past. So that's all. That's a way to almost challenge in some ways what your vendors, what your stakeholders are telling you about tasks. So, for instance, um, in telecom, there are maybe like 20 steps in the construction project in the construction process that are pretty much ubiquitous, right? They're there in any time. And if your contractor's telling you that it's going to take 3 days to get power run, the concrete pad laid out, and everything ready for L&A work, but that you've done 100 projects in the past and it's taken 7 days, then that is important to bring up to your contractor. How are you going to be able to do this in 3 days? I've never seen this done in less than a week. And maybe they have a way to do it, or maybe they just aren't really aware that, oh, you actually you can only dig with shovels in our, you can't dig with a bobcat, something like that. And so yeah, historical data, vendor
The
input.
expert opinions also. Yeah.
Yeah, expert opinion. Yeah, there's a lot of angles, but I think maybe to summarize, you using multiple angles to challenge what's in the schedule is a good thing to do in planning to make sure you're getting the best input.
Right. So in most of the situation, we often receive one common suggestion: if you are not meeting the deadline, just double the resources. That way we will be able to meet the deadline. Sometimes I feel like it's okay, you know, if at all we are doing. So what's your perspective on this one? Go ahead and double up the resources. So what challenges we may face, and what are the different perspective on this on particular this point? What's your thoughts?
Uh, so in planning, again, you gotta plan your contingencies. If I need more resources, what am I approved to do? If And what am I not approved to do? And
Mhm.
so having that on paper helps you kind of figure that out, I would say. But so let's say you're just absolutely capped at your budget and you need more. There on a project is a set, or maybe even one key decision maker that is accountable for those decisions: sponsor, customer, whatever it is. um, they are the ones that should make that. Maybe you are, as the project leader, you have the ability to make that call. um, I would, well, now I'm thinking too, there are other, there's practices that I'd say best practices in budget management that are important to do before your budget is in the red, and that can help you as well. So understanding, so within a project, you've got cash allocated to, 30 different, 100 different, line items, right? You've got IT, you've got construction, you've got labor, all kinds of stuff. Being able to have that single point of accountability, bring stakeholders together, and if you have an urgent budget need, trying to figure out where am I going to get the money from. Sometimes you can go over budget. Sometimes you go over budget and someone's leaving. And so, in that case where there is no extra money, you got to find it somewhere else. And, bringing stakeholders together and having a real conversation, where can I find this extra money, is, you know,
Correct. Yeah.
probably the
So there
best
are a
practice.
lot of rolling items involved. So we need to take care of each and everything. That's when you'll be coming to a concrete decision. So on the similar note again, we often say, okay, any project kind of runs with over budget sometimes. Do you see it as a project failure?
Well, the humanitarian in me wants to focus on the successes, and not categorize projects that way just for a budget overage. But the reality is, there are some projects that there are consequences if you go over budget. And
Right.
so, yeah, I think in some cases, if you're not willing to categorize something as a failure, you're not going to learn as strong a lesson as an organization as you would if you say, look, this,
Mhm.
we had a ironclad budget. This project went over for these reasons. Somebody has to be held accountable, and we will, adjust our practices going forward to make sure this doesn't happen. Um, yeah, like I said, I would love to be, sunshine and rainbows, pie in the sky. But there are absolutely projects that if you go over budget, it is a failure, and
Consequences. Yeah.
someone is held
So that's
accountable.
true. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that's very true. Now, could you think of some situations where you have created a project schedule or the project plan, and you have sent for approval? Now, did you face any challenge obtaining the executive approval? Now, if so, how did you able to manage that?
Updating executive approval. Like I mentioned before, projects never go exactly to plan, and so there's always going to be some level of cadence with your sponsors. And
Mhm.
when something goes south or something goes sideways, let's say, that requires a schedule adjustment, and let's say your organization does not allow schedule adjustments without sponsor approval. Uh, having that communication cadence and immediately going to them and being very, to the point about what changed, why it's changing, what are some of the mitigation strategies that you've tried or are on the table to try and get things back on track. If those are not options, here is your best recommendation as the project leader as to what move forward. Do I have your approval? Yes or no? And opening a conversation like that is how I've done it in the past, and it's good. The guiding principles on that. You better do it quickly. Don't when something goes sideways, don't wait to tell anyone. I would always recommend bringing recommendations to the table, so you're not coming to your executive sponsor saying, "We're late 30 days on this. What do I do?" You need to do the legwork and figure out what the options are, what the consequences are for each of those options, and present them clearly and quickly, succinctly, I should say. And yeah, and when done well, executive or a sponsor, whoever it is, can make a call. They're comfortable being accountable because they feel like they have all the information, and you just move forward and track the results of whatever change you made. I think if projects are set up well, that's a pretty doable
That's
cadence.
great. That's great. So I think we are approaching the time now. However, so what are the three brilliant tips you would like to suggest to our all the entry level project managers out there, and regarding project planning or overall project management perspective, to help them succeed in the pathway?
Ooh, good question. So entry level project leaders.
Yeah.
I'd probably have the same advice for a lot of different positions, but find somebody that's really good at it, one, and
Mhm.
help them be successful. And in turn, you will pick up some things from them. I think that's important. I think early in your career, I think there's education, certifications, and things that can help you kind of fill your tool bag. In terms of best practices for project management. So if you're early in your career, and you don't have a lot of like results necessarily to illustrate on a resume or in a conversation with a customer, I think certifications are certainly helpful. Um, I would also say, so there's you could probably spend a whole call talking about the pitfalls, and reasons why certifications are helpful. But project management is just as much of an art as it is a science.
Science.
Yeah. So often what I've seen is people who spend years accumulating certifications bring science and not art to the project. When you land it, let's say you're starting on a new project that is high profile. There's objectives, there's tasks, there's budgets, but there's also people. There's people that you need support of. There's people that you will need to influence against their incentives. And in order to do that, you have to learn how to build relationships with people, how to support them, how to make sure that they're, you know, each of us, every one of us, whether it's an executive or just an entry level, stakeholder, each of us has our own goals and desires, and we have to be able to, try to align those as the project leader with our stakeholders so that we get the best. And that is an art. And again, if you're looking to learn the art, finding someone that's really good, right, that has people in their corner, that gets results, and that does it in a way that's warm and supportive, finding those people and getting in their meetings and just watching and osmosing what they do is that's my best recommendation, primarily because that's how I learned. I had some incredible mentors, still do, and I'm standing on their shoulders, and I will the rest of my career. And so finding those people is best advice I can give.
Those are really spot on, and definitely these three tips will help people understand the importance of finding the right guru or the right mentor, in order to which will help them propel in their career forward. That's brilliant. All right, so with this discussion we will wrap up our discussion on trends and about project management. So I hope our listeners found the insights valuable. Now I know we are running about the time. However, I'll take 5 more minutes here. So now let's switch our gears a bit, because I personally believe understanding our guests beyond their professional expertise is much important. So I have a few fun, interesting questions for you. So are you good for that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So let's start with something light and joyful. So what's your hobby or interest you have picked up recently that brings you joy outside of your work?
Ooh, picked up recently? Man,
Mhm.
I'm very predictable. So I've had hobbies that I have enjoyed since I was, 4 years old that I'm still doing. I love to play music. I'm first a guitar player, but play piano and all kinds of other things too. Really enjoyed that. Outdoors, I love to fish and hunt. That's always been something. That's something my dad introduced me to that we still do together, and that's just been a huge joy of mine. I like to teach Bible classes, so that's something that I've done, much of my life, and that brings me a lot of joy. And right now, maybe the most recent hobby, if you want to call it, is being a dad. That's just been a joy. A lot of the hobbies that I learned to love as a child, I'm now getting the most enjoyment out of by watching my 3-year-old first be introduced to them. Right, her first little toy guitar that she plays, the first time she's trying to like hang on to a fish that I've caught, like it's a tremendous joy. And so yeah, that's some mix of those is where I'm at.
That's really sounds amazing. So books and podcasts can be such powerful resources for our own career growth, professional development, and inspiration. you know so reflecting on that, what's the one piece of advice you wish you could give to your younger self, and along with that, what sort of books or resources you would suggest?
Ooh, okay. So advice to my younger self is there's two. I'll do two just because they're both. So this has been a major kind of life transition for me, right? So I've done a lot of in coming out of corporate America and starting my own kind of firm. Certainly had a lot of things I needed to learn, and I'm still learning, and things kind of reflections, right, over my career. So the first thing that I would tell my younger self is to focus as much as I can early in my career on hard skills rather than finding people management. So people management in a corporate setting is kind of how you see your paycheck grow, right? Which is great, and man of a young family, that was very important to me. But when I left and tried to start my own firm, it's difficult to sell emotional intelligence, or whatever makes a people leader successful. And so, fortunately, I had some mentors that taught me how to run a spreadsheet, the financial analysis, stuff like that, and then the hard skills around project management. That's really important to build those and to be an expert. Maybe not the best at one thing, but really good at two to three things. Project management, finance, marketing, whatever it is. Developing those hard skills earlier in your career, I think, is very important. And the second advice that, again, I'm learning from my own mistakes is to focus on your network and network all the time. When I was at Crown Castle early in my career, I felt like I was networking, but my example or my networking practice was calling people in other Crown Castle departments. And that is not really networking, right? That's, networking within the company. But when I left, my network was basically zero. It was everybody that was either still at Crown or had left with me. And I will never make that mistake again. Calling people in your network, keeping up with them, learning, introducing, trying to connect other people, having them connect you with other people. That is not only is that personally or professionally fulfilling in that it helps you, earn a living over time, it's very personally fulfilling as well. And so my younger self, learn how to network and do it often. So books, podcasts, as a new business owner, I've been focusing not really on project management as much as marketing, marketing and sales. I am very much new to that world. And so, Matt Easton, he has a lot of sales content. He has helped me develop a sales style that is very real and authentic. Or I'm trying to. I don't know. I probably couldn't say that I have that mastered yet. But Matt Easton, you can find him anywhere on any social media. He does a lot of great sales content. And then let's see. I know there's been several. What is it? Story brand framework, I want to say. Actually, hang on. Let me see. Let me see who wrote that because this is a really good one.
And just to this for our audience, we will put that in our comment section, the recommended books and the podcasts and any links, so please go and watch out that.
Yeah, Story Brand Framework has really helped me learn better how. It's by Donald Miller, Story Brand Framework. That's really helped me learn how to talk about my value add in a way that's compelling to potential buyers. And again, that's something that I spent zero time thinking about for the first 10 years of my life and 100% of my time thinking about for the last 6 months. So that book has been great. It's transitioned kind of how I talk about my offering and things like that. And so, yeah, definitely recommend that for anyone who's starting out on their own.
That's great. Such a valuable insights and strong recommendations. Okay, so I think with this we will wrap our conversation today. So thank you for sharing these wonderful insights. It's always great to know our guests in a deeper level so that we can build connections, as we all are here to build meaningful conversation relationships as well as conversation. So I hope our audience enjoyed this segment as much I did. So thanks, Shade, for your time. And with this note, I would like to conclude the show. Thanks everyone for watching this show, and stay tuned for more engaging, resourceful contents to the Sunil show. Yeah,
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Sunil. Thank you very much.
sure. Thanks, Shade. Thanks for your time.